My guest this week is Ann Magnuson. Ann has fronted bands, acted in film, theater, and on TV, performed in museums and galleries, written for various publications, and is a visual artist. After studying theater and cinema in London, she worked in New York City with the Ensemble Studio Theater, managed Club 57, and rubbed elbows with Keith Haring, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Andy Warhol. Ann appeared with David Bowie in The Hunger and starred in Making Mr. Right opposite John Malkovich. She fronted the indie cult band Bongwater, who released 5 albums from 1986 to 1992, and has released many solo albums, starting with The Love Show, put out on Geffen Records in 1995. In addition to narrating the new audiobook for jazz legend Anita O'Day's memoir, which is now out on Audible, she recorded a new song, Ghost Cat, written by Magnuson about the local ghosts and monsters in her native West Virginia. The track was produced by Don Dixon and features all West Virginia-based musicians, as well as a harmonica from Nashville legend Charlie McCoy, who Magnuson met when she was inducted into the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame in 2018. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Revolutions Per Movie, Ann Magnuson. Hi, Ann.
Hey, hi, y'all.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
Good to be here by the miracle of technology, which drives us all crazy. It drives me crazy. I just stop inventing new gadgets, stop making me upgrade and learn something new, because I can't get a hold of the old technology, let alone this new stuff. It's driving me crazy, but it does allow us to be more connected.
Yes,
and that's nice.
I'm here with you today, and you're here with me, but we can ignore the technology. I just did one of the bonus shows I have on my Patreon is called Metal Machine Mind Meld, where myself and a guest listen to Metal Machine music
Oh my gosh.
at full blast and headphones while trying to have a serious discussion. And the first one was about my fear of technology, because I just am a techno dummy. I just feel really out of step in a way and kind of behind. But yeah, having Lou Reed's analog synth-driven noise thing.
Oh my God. I remember so well when my neighbor, Charlie McAwee, brought that album back from the record store, said, I've got the new Lou Reed record. And we sat and listened to it in his suburban living room. I don't know if we got past the first side. We didn't know what to make of it. Didn't know what to make of it. But we actually, I think we thought it was kind of brilliant, because at anything that was contrary to the top 40 was always a winner in our world.
Oh yeah, and even the language on it, he's like, this is the best thing I've ever done, even though I'll never listen to it. And, just so cocky. It's kind of magical. So, but yeah, I'm right there with you on technology. But here we are, connected by technology. And I kind of want to go back a little bit about when you were booking Club 57. I have your calendar here that I get every year from you. I love it.
I just made some new ones, and so people can buy some on my website.
Excellent.
By the time they hear this.
I'll put a link to it for sure. I love poring over it. I mean, you would have things like Steve and Edie lookalike contests, decadent high-fashion bacchanal parties, a tribute to the Farfisa. But you were also programming all these films like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I Am a Groupie, The Tammy Show, Don't Knock the Rock.
I didn't program the films. Well, there were one or two, but there were other people. I was the person who people came to say, I want to do this or I want to do that. And then, of course, I would create, make up things I wanted to do too. But it was quite a collaborative experience.
But it must have been hard to even get access to these films at the time. I mean,
no, you could rent them. There were these catalogs. You just poured through the catalog and rented. And usually it was a 16 millimeter print, and somebody who had a projector would bring it into the club, and that's the way you did it. Very old fashioned.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I worked at a media arts center, and it would be like, we don't have the second reel from this film from Russia. Like, we can't show it. Like, things just would not show up, It was kind of amazing.
Right. That it was quite an industry to rent. You could rent almost anything that was available in these various catalogs. So there were the There was the Monster Movie Club, which was specific to horror, mostly bad horror, and
Uh-huh.
there were all kinds of genres that were being explored. So, and then we had people who made their own films and showed their Super 8 films. I showed my student film of Elvis Presley coming to Charleston, West Virginia on our Elvis Memorial Night. And that was exciting. And I was praying to God that the projector wouldn't eat the film because there was only one copy and I had a bazillion edits in it.
Right.
But thankfully, the Museum of Modern Art has acquired that film, and I've got to get it on my YouTube channel because they cleaned it up and it's not going to get eaten by a projector. That's one good thing about technology advances.
I think technology will win us over by the time we're done with this interview, but
Oh,
that's
it's already controlling us. Yes, get ready.
what about making Ghost Cat? You probably made that so differently than, what you would have composed or made a record by in the past.
Well, we premiered Ghost Cat as a song in West Virginia. I'm from West Virginia and I go back pretty frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with Michael Lipton, who runs the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame, and some of his musicians from the band The Carpenter Ants, and the guys who play for Mountain Stage, the radio show that's out of Charleston, West Virginia. So we did a series of Halloween shows there in 2022, and I decided I want to record Ghost Cat. I couldn't get back to West Virginia, so I sang it into a voice memo, the arrangement of the way I wanted it to be. I sent it to Michael Lipton, and I just usually I'm a Capricorn, so very much of a control freak,
Me
but
too.
I thought this is too hard to. I can't. If we're going to get this done, I just have to trust him. So he put it together. The musicians, Don Dixon, who's worked with REM way back when, he comes down to West Virginia from Canton, Ohio, and records people when they need when they want recording. He has a whole system that he comes down with, and so they recorded that, piggybacking on another person's recording session.
Right.
And then they sent me the track and I put on my vocals here. And then I asked Michael, I thought it was a long shot, but I said, Michael, do you think there's any way we could get Charlie McCoy to put harmonica on this? I'd met Charlie when I got inducted to the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame in 2018, and he was part of the band. And he goes and he helps out Michael and Mountain Stage a lot. And everybody who's from West Virginia, for the most part, has deep roots there, and it's hard to not go back and want to be part of things. There's a certain camaraderie among those of us who grew up there. And Michael said, well, we'll just ask him. And he agreed. And so he put on his harmonica part in Nashville, and Don Dixon mixed the whole thing together in Canton, Ohio. And he did a brilliant job. And then I just, you put it on iTunes or whatever, and I got my frequent collaborator here in Los Angeles, Adam Dugas, to do a video, and we did that. It was so DIY.
Yeah.
And I was kind of grumbling the whole time, I'm too old for this. And I would whip up these backgrounds, draw these things and make collages, like really last minute, like, oh, we need something, we need this.
Right.
It was so much like the old days, like in the late 70s or the early 80s. And that part was fun after I got over the pain in the assery part of the whole thing. But he brought over we bought a green screen. He brought it into the living room. We set it up and shot me. I just rummaged through my closet and said, oh, what am I going to wear? Okay, here's an old poncho. Here's an old skirt. Ugh. I'll just be barefoot. Fuck it. I don't care anymore. I'm not even going to get a pedicure. This old crone in the hills needs to have long, witchy toenails. So then I grabbed things out from the backyard that I like collect weird things like pieces of wood and rocks and rusted crap that I find out in Joshua Tree. And it was all very much like stuff you'd find in West Virginia. And it's part of my bigger ism called a surrealism, which is this finding the surreal in the rural, which is kind of
Hmm.
happens in, I've been doing art and video and all kinds of in performance around this umbrella term out in Joshua Tree and in West Virginia. So it all came together because of Adam's brilliant editing and his patience to pull it all together. And then, as we always say, it's going to tell us what it wants to be.
Right.
And it came together, and we had this video, and KCRW made Ghost Cat the song of the day for the Day of the Dead. So it's all great that happens. It's just, it'd be nice if somebody could fund these
Oh my gosh.
things.
Yeah, I know, because it does cut down the cost to be able to do it DIY. But I do think, you having the experience of doing DIY, for on so many different projects, whether it's
For my
filmmaking,
entire life, the entire life.
yeah, whether it's filmmaking, theater, making music, it's just we were at a time where there was no it was like careerism was kind of a weird thought in that kind of art.
Oh, it was very, very much of a dirty word. But
Yeah.
then I realized I gotta pay the bills. And
Yes.
then there are other people who expect me to pay their bills, and
Right.
that had to work my way out of those situations. But well, the thing is, when you're compelled to create, you're just gonna do it.
Right.
You're gonna do it. Even when you say, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm too old for this. And I took about 6 weeks off, went to Joshua Tree, just hunkered down and relaxed. I had a crazy year last year of
Hmm.
so much activity with different bands, and the Broad wanted me to put together these events for the Keith Haring retrospective.
Right.
And this is kind of a, not really so much of a secret, but Vulcan Death Grip has been recording new
Oh
songs.
my God. That's amazing. I can't
Yes.
wait. I have so many links to put in your show notes now of like, here's some Vulcan Death Grip footage. Here's
Oh yeah.
here's Ghost Cat. Here's yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, my life is one crazy collage of so many different things. It drives me kind of crazy. I can't even imagine. People always say, "Well, how would you describe yourself?" I was like, I don't know. I don't care. I just got to do this stuff, and it just happens. I guess a multimedia shapeshifter, maybe. I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, the film you picked to talk about, Jazz on a Summer's Day, direct connection with you recently because I guess you performed Anita O'Day. You played her reading her audiobook, High Times, Hard Times. Yeah, it's a 1981 book. And I have some questions to ask about what that process is like.
Oh,
I,
yes,
I mean,
please.
were you familiar with the book in her life before getting this job?
I was not familiar with her beyond Jazz on a Summer's Day.
Right.
I, it's funny. I don't in the 80s in New York, I listened to, I can't remember the call letters now, the radio station, but it was mostly big band and jazz music.
Okay.
Jonathan Schwartz was one of the main DJs. And I know that I've heard her, but I didn't really follow that genre that much, except I enjoyed what I heard, but I didn't buy the records or anything because I never
Sure.
had any money. I just never had any money. I bought things at thrift stores here and there. But what happened was Robbie Cavallina owns the Anita O'Day estate,
Okay.
and he became very good friends with her and took care of her in her later years. And she gave him everything. And he has a great documentary about her called Anita O'Day, The Life of a Jazz Singer, that came out in 2007. And I highly recommend that. And it has a lot of the unedited footage of her performance from Jazz on a Summer's Day. He contacted me out of the blue and wanted to make an audiobook of her memoir that he had the rights to. So he booked a studio in Atwater Village, and we went there together, and I went through this thing chapter by chapter, and not all at once. He was very patient. He'd had a lot of editing to do because I didn't just read it all the way through. I would stop and say, I can do that better, or let me do this.
Right.
So it took a long time to the process took a long time. I just watched her on a lot of I watched the documentary, I watched a lot of her films, I listened to the music, watched many of her interviews on television, and those really helped. And I would bring those up on my phone whenever I felt like I wasn't getting her her vibe. But I wasn't trying to do an impression of her. I just wanted to get a sense of her. She was very no nonsense, a very practical person. And Robbie said that I actually added a lot more self reflection and sentimentality to some of the readings that she would not have done. But I was never, ever bored. The process is somewhat tedious. I think it's tedious for the editor more than it was for me. But
Right.
but this woman's life is unbelievable. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
It's incredible what she experienced.
Yes.
She just barreled through life, did what she wanted to do, did not want to do anything that bored her. I relate to that. There was a lot of stuff in there I related to, but her chutzpah and her survival mechanism, or in luck, if you want to call it that, is remarkable. And the people she worked with, and in the bebop jazz world, but going further back, she was in those dance marathons when she was a teenager.
Professional walkathoner. And I was like, what? I had to look that up. Like, what is a professional walkathoner?
I know it's and she said that that movie They Shoot Horses, Don't They, was very true to, and that if that alone was just fascinating, but her whole life.
Yeah.
And then of course she got involved in heroin, ironically, to stop drinking. Because she met this drummer, John Poole, and saw that he never had to drink, or he never was drinking, and he seemed to be fine. And she wanted to know what his secret was. And she found out, and she got set up by the cops and put in jail. She was in prison. But her stories are just incredible. So it was a real honor to read her words from her memoir.
Her language, the way she writes, is just so alive. You know, she's just so frank and colorful at the same time. So she'll say, like, the price of being a hip swinging chick eventually had become too great to pay. I almost had to die to take the first step in learning how to live. Necessity explains my style. And there's just so much there already. And I just love listening to you read her words. Her, like you said, her whole life, from her childhood, which was complicated, to like being a independent young teenager, you know, and getting into the scene. It's just fascinating.
Well, she was very compelled. She just had the quintessential artist's soul and need to express herself through this medium of singing, which she discovered she had, you know, a talent for. And yes, she was hanging out in these jazz clubs in very questionable parts of Chicago, and going on the road with big bands, with Gene Krupa, with Benny Goodman, and living in the moment, for the moment, and channeling this gift that she had. And what I really what I found interesting was that she didn't want to sing a song the same way twice. And that's why she was more interested in jazz and certainly bebop, and did not become a household name because to be a pop singer, you have to do the song the same all the time. And she did not have the attention span for that, or the artistic spirit required her to always innovate. And that's what's really fascinating about her style and the way she does things. And it's on display in Jazz on a Summer's Day.
Oh, big time. When did you first see this film?
I don't remember. I think it might have been okay. I think it was in the 90s, and my friend Matt Amato, who is a filmmaker, and he makes beautiful um, music videos, and he was very influenced by that Burt Stearns approach to shooting the audience, shooting the performers. I mean, it's stylistically quite beautiful, and I think Judith Christ said of the film, like every shot could stand alone as a still image, a beautiful still image. And of course, he was a fashion photographer, and he had that production company with Marilyn Monroe. And there are many moments where you look at the audience and the way women are dressed, and I keep thinking, boy, I could just see Marilyn in this audience wearing a scarf over her head, and capri pants and a tight top, and looking like a glamorous beatnik chick. So Matt had I think they showed that he showed a lot of fun things at their apartment on Orange Street. He was very close with Heath Ledger, and that's how I knew Heath.
Okay.
And they had a production company called The Masses. So they created some beautiful video, and you can see his work in Matt Amato. Check out his Instagram page. He did some work with Bon Iver and just a whole lot of people, a whole lot of people. Yeah, so Matt Amato turned me on to the film, and I hadn't really seen it since then. I knew of it, but then when I got this gig to do the Anita O'Day memoir audiobook, I revisited it and was completely blown away
Yeah.
by her, by the look of it, and it's a beautiful film. I will say I was reading a piece by Richard Brody in the New Yorker that has a lot of contrary things to say about it, and he's not wrong, as they say.
Yeah. Even the New York Times, when it came out, were critical. They said the shots, while entertaining, do not add up to much. Some series, indeed, are pretentious and represent little more than the photographer's whim. Before I opened the video store, I worked at the Northwest Film Center for 5 years, helping in education and stuff. And the beginning filmmaker teacher who taught art of filmmaking always showed this, was the first thing they showed to people who wanted to be a filmmaker. And you could tell
Wow.
some of the students just checked out. They were not interested. They were just like, why do we see so much reflective water? Why are we seeing the
Mm-hmm.
audience? Why are they taking their gaze off this? And then the other half were so compelled by it. And I think once I had the video store, this might be the film I listened to the most from the right side of my head with a TV playing. I played this all the time. So even though I didn't watch
Yes.
it, I know the beats of this film musically, the editing of it. I can just picture it in my head. And I think it is a spectacular film, but you have to let go of the tradition of, like, if you're a Thelonious Monk fan, you might be frustrated that they take
Yes.
the gaze away from him and they kind of,
Put it on the Kennedy-esque white people on their
yes,
yachts,
exactly. And then a radio
which,
announcer being like, oh, it's a beautiful day, and meanwhile, Monk's piano playing's underneath it. But I feel like the first half of the film, it's a slower pace, like long takes, filming from the side of a performer. There's less editing choices than what happens as the film moves into night. But you're absolutely correct. The film is beautiful, And, Bert Stern, who I didn't know much about him till recently, just about his history in fashion photography. But I guess he was obsessed with the red shoes, which makes total sense when you watch this
Oh
film.
yeah.
He
Mm-hmm.
he brought in his own lighting equipment, and he tried to find the richest, deepest film stock he could find. And the film is it's a look that you can't even find anymore in terms of saturated
Exactly.
color.
I think what I like that I like that it. Well, I was born in 1956. This film is 1958. It really brings back a visceral sense memory of my childhood in the way my parents looked, the way people looked, the cars, the colors. The reds seemed redder, the blues were bluer, the way the women, the cat-eyed glasses, the scarves, the pearls, the hairstyles of the men. It's almost like a tone poem at the beginning. It just has a quality that one has in childhood, if you're lucky enough to have a somewhat idyllic childhood, which I did, at least the beginning, for sure, growing up in West Virginia. And this sort of lazy summer day, that quality is refreshing in a world where everything is about scrolling and all this awful news, and awful things were happening then, of course, but there was something personally for me, that's, I suppose you would call it nostalgic, but it just allowed me to exhale and, like, oh yeah, we can just, this is a beautiful summer day. We're going to listen to some great music. There's people are on the ocean or on the river with their boats, and for a moment in time, everything's just chill. It's okay, and everyone looks great.
Oh my God,
And
yes. My God, everyone's gorgeous.
well, I'm sure also, being who he was, they were picking up. I mean, the camera's picking up these gorgeous young women
Yes.
and young men, but you're also getting a sense of people in the late 50s, white people who were quote unquote hip, gravitating towards jazz clubs, to a more of a beatnik kind of mentality. Um, Proto hippies, I suppose, but that I think for me it was like seeing my parents
Mhm.
very young, and when they would cut to people dancing to the music, I remember seeing my parents dancing like that when we would go as a family to the one club. It was called the Press Club. West Virginia was a dry state, so these if you went out to dinner and if they were going to have cocktails, it had to be a special, you had to have special license.
Wow.
So I do know that Bob Thompson, I think from West Virginia Mountain Stage show, and he's a very well respected and excellent jazz musician, pianist. He played around town at that time, I believe, and if somebody I went to high school with, his father booked that club. So there was just these memories that come back. It's like having your own life, well, parts of it, just little bits of it projected, and the richness of that film, that is so beautiful. And that's a real pleasure. There was just a screening of Making Mr. Right, which is a film I was in. It came out in 87. And it was the first time it had been projected, a 35 millimeter print, in a New York theater called Metrograph, where they do that. And everyone was raving about how beautiful the film was. And the colors were, and it's funny that Susan Seidelman and all of us at that time were very much, the new wave sensibility of the 80s had a lot of a throwback to this late 50s,
Totally.
retro, the colors, and but everything now is there's this weird thing going on. I think David Fincher might be the culprit who started this.
Hmm.
But you know how they drain all the color out of something and it's sort of these grays and these blues
Yeah, it's
and it's
cold.
very, very cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
This stuff is very warm. So it's like getting a hug from your mom when you're really young.
Oh, it makes you want to be there so badly.
Yes.
What's interesting about the first half of the film is that there's a lot more kind of story, little mini stories happening. Like these kids coming into town in a jalopy playing jazz, and they're seen throughout, like in different parts of the city, of the
Yes.
town. And then one of my favorite moments is when they're dancing on the roof and there's like this kid bartender trying to keep up and things are
Yes.
exploding, and it's just
It's like the house party we all are,
yes.
went to as teenagers or
Yeah.
college kids.
And then you realize, like, there's this woman dancing on top. She's taking her red cardigan off, and people are clapping at her, and she's having a blast. And then it slows down, and there's like a cello piece with a member of Chico
Yes,
Hamilton's band. It's still, the light's starting to go down. He's alone in a room.
that's Nathan Gershom.
Amazing performance. Like, it just sweat pouring off him. He's shirtless. And he's just this big hulking man playing this beautiful music. And then he's playing this really lonely tune, and it shows like kids playing in the yard.
It's the prelude to Bach's cello suite number 1.
Excellent.
Yes, and then they cut to these white kids who don't have shirts, but just very innocent toddlers playing. There was a beautiful innocence to it.
Yeah, and the woman in the red cardigan is like staggering down to the water, and
Yes,
then it shows the bartender,
yes,
and he does this thing that's one of my favorite parts in the movie, where he does a thing where you can't tell if he's laughing or crying with his head in his hands because he's been so put on early in this just little thing, and I'm like, oh my god, the weight. And then the cello player stops, and he puts a cigarette, lights it, and then finishes. And it is just so fucking cool. I just love that piece.
yeah. I think that is the strength of the movie. It's the thing that the New Yorker writer Richard Brody identified as a weakness, and I think he's not completely incorrect, but it just depends on how you want to see the film. I think that his critique of it being more from a white um, perspective is correct. And I have to say, I wasn't thinking about that, but at the beginning, when Thelonious Monk was playing, and then they cut to these sailboats with these
Yes.
Kennedy family types on there, and I thought, wow, this is white. Nothing says white privilege like these yacht sailboat.
Yeah. And well, they're even before Monk plays, they're like telling the audience, it's like they're like, okay, everybody, what you're going to hear is going to freak you out a bit. He's going to be finding, these notes that don't exist in Western music, like
Right.
prepare yourself. And it's like, I doubt when Anita Day went out, they had to tell you what you were going to hear. So that whole thing with Thelonious Monk is probably the weirdest part of the film in terms of like, this is definitely a Burt Stern movie.
It doesn't ruin it for me, but I think it's possible to see these things from a variety of perspectives and just let it be what it is. Richard Brody in the New Yorker said there were musicians who were at the festival who were admitted from the film. Let's see, there's Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, Max Roach, Mary Lou
Mm-hmm.
Williams. And his quote, and I wrote the quote down, he says, if they'd shown them, they could have thrown audiences back on their heels with their music. But, who knows? Maybe they didn't have a release from them or whatever.
I have some information about that.
Oh,
Burt Stern basically said, he was asking the people who put the festival on, like, why haven't you documented this before? And they said, well, it's just too hard to get it together, the release forums. And Burt Stern said, well, let's just film it and then we'll worry about that later. and that's what he
Yeah.
did. And so I always wondered, like, oh, maybe it got messy in some way, or, but at the same time, it's hard to know again, like what interested Bert Stern. I mean, it is his film. It is done through the
Yes,
scope of
yes.
a fashion photographer who's definitely looking for beautiful moments and beautiful colors and beautiful people.
Yes, yes. Yes, and I think that, so I think, all of us have been to many music festivals, which there's like a bazillion people on the bill, and everybody has a different experience. And you can make, 50 different kinds of films from one music festival. You could still never cover everything. Um, but I think what's great about this film is that it introduces people who may not be familiar with jazz at all, or at least not
Right.
a lot of these people I wasn't familiar with, and it sent me down a rabbit hole to learn more about them. Like Eric Dolphy, who plays with the Chico Hamilton Quintet, that incredible shamanic piece that's right after Chuck Berry doing Sweet Little 16.
It is
And
amazing.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, getting chills because it takes you to a whole other a dimension. And so it's like, well, who is Eric Dolphy? And looking him
Right.
up and getting more information and getting turned on to these other people. And of course, I knew my father was a jazz fan. I knew George Shearing was one of my dad's favorites, and Louis Armstrong was on television all the time.
Sure.
My grandmother loved Mahalia Jackson. That was her favorite because my grandfather was a Swedish evangelist. He was a preacher, so she
Okay.
was very, very much a believer and played the piano and in the church and everything. But so getting to spend time with these people and just even a small form, it, it felt like it brought me closer to my own family experiences and brought them back.
Yeah.
And that, for me personally, makes it even more special. And then it just all these other Big Maybell, the intensity with it was like, wow, she's in what a pleasure to just get
I know.
exposure to
Incredible.
somebody like that I didn't know existed. Talk about being white, I and it's like, whoa, like this is something. This is
Yeah.
somewhere. This is taking us somewhere that is so beyond a commercial market or anything. It's like the pure joy of the moment of being so driven and
Yes.
inside of the music. She went on at midnight when it's
Oh,
Sunday. They said it's
wow.
Sunday because Mahalia Jackson would not sing secular music. She believed that her gift was from God and it was only to serve God. So I love that she wouldn't even go on stage until it was Sunday.
Oh, that's so incredible. The way she just looks into the audience, even before the song, like the intro to a song, she's just in love. And there's that great point where she goes, "Oh, you make me feel like I'm a star." And everyone, you can hear
I
people in the audience
know.
go like, "You are, you're a star." Like I can't imagine seeing her perform after midnight, after a long day like that. Just
I'm wondering, I need to go down doing a little research. Like, I'm wondering how many of those sorts of secular events she even did,
yeah,
because she was very, from what I learned, that she was very committed to only using her gift for gospel music, not any secular music.
wow. Let's talk about the Anita O'Day performance in this film.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I love that the way they showed the audience, people were kind of bored or looking at their watch. Somebody was eating half a sandwich. And they're kind of lackadaisical. It's like, all right. And then she starts to win them over. That's not even the right word, win them over. She just starts doing her thing.
Yeah, she comes out slow, out of the gate. It's like a bongo and voice dirge of sweet Georgia Brown. And what's cool about it too is she's doing that thing. I didn't know that she would like lean back from the mic and then come forward as like a kind of like doing a volume knob through physicality.
Oh yes. Oh, she knew how to use that voice. She knew how to use the microphone. She was a major, major pro by that point. And what the audience was doing, I don't think she cared because she just did her thing and they came to her. They
Yes.
came to her. And boy, by the end, they're standing ovation, cheering. And it's beautiful to see the way she just maneuvers the vibe and brings them in. She just seduces them in, but not not caring what. I mean, she's just doing her thing. They come to her because it's like because they can't help themselves. It's
Well, there's such theatricality to her performance. Like she's like just having fun, and the way she just changes the shape of her body as she's performing. At one point, I love it. She does a stage move I've never seen before. She's like she's clasping her hands together around, like hugging a microphone, and then standing really properly. It's just so cool. It's like just so full of confidence. And I could
oh
just see,
yes.
you can see the audience. You're right. They're warming up. I mean, this is kind of the first star performance that you can tell the audience, who have been in the hot sun and got there early are starting to come around to.
And it's during the day, so the light,
Yes.
it's bright. It's not like a jazz club with, nice lighting
She's got
or
a cool outfit on, lovely hat.
well, I actually found the part in her memoir where she talks about that. Would you like me to read it?
Oh my God, are you kidding? What if I said no? I definitely want to hear it. Of course. That's awesome.
Okay, let me see. Where's 242? Okay, it's page 242. I'll try to remember her point, her delivery, but it's not going to be an impression. Okay. Of the four appearances in Newport, 1958 was the watershed appearance. In 56, we were under rehearsed. In 69, it was singing in the rain. In 79, it was just nice to be back. But in 1958, I remember with a lot of heart. Today, there are jazz festivals all over the place, and half the performers aren't really jazz musicians. In those days, Newport was probably the only great one. When you appeared there, you were among your peers. Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach, Miles Davis, Jerry Mulligan, Teddy Wilson all hung around the park, making it an up thing. I was scheduled for 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I asked myself what to wear. It's tea time, I told the Italian lady who ran a dress shop in Greenwich Village. She brought out this black dress trimmed with white. We both knew it was right, but I asked what I could wear on my head. She went into the back room and came out with a black cartwheel trimmed with white feathers. Both went with my see-through plastic pumps for a fun touch, and I added short white gloves. Unbeknownst to me, Bert Stern, a famous advertising and fashion photographer, was there with a camera crew shooting a full-length documentary. It had rained, and if you watch closely, you can see me scrape the mud off my shoe as I start up the first step towards the stand. Bert Block of Associated Booking asked John to get me to sign a release to allow them to film my set. John signed it and never brought the subject up. John was John Poole, her drummer. So to me, this was just a swinging gig, not a turning point in my career. Performing in the afternoon was a bonus because I could see the audience. I spotted Chris Connor out there. That was good because I make my performance the way I want it to be when I know some of the audience digs what I'm doing and I can relate to them. I was high as a kite, but I was really functioning when we swung into the first of the 9 numbers. Incidentally, it was John Poole on drums, not Max Roach, as it's usually assumed. Metronome called me the festival's outstanding act. Esquire said I was the hit. All I knew was I began working to a rather apathetic audience, but they responded quickly, and by the end of the 9-tune set, I really had them. In those days, we'd just begun doing Tea for Two as a fast tune, and it was as fresh to us as to the audience. There was a big reaction, a lot of applause at the end of the set. In a club, I'd have given them more, but at a festival, you take your bow and get out of the way so they can bring on things for the next group. It seems to me there's no better example of not knowing when Lady Luck is going to touch you on the shoulder than this Newport gig. Bert Stern was shooting my whole set, but that didn't mean they'd use any of it. Also, they were using 16 tracks, and it took them almost a year to edit and coordinate the sound and the images. I didn't have much faith in the commercial appeal of a documentary called Jazz on a Summer's Day. In fact, I could have bought a full share for $200 and passed it up. Then suddenly I began hearing from everybody about the picture, especially about my two spots, Sweet Georgia Brown and Tea for Two. Newsweek ran a lovely photo of me along with a rave review. The New York Times reported, and I quote, Anita O'Day making mincemeat of Sweet Georgia Brown and Tea for Two is as vivid and insinuating as is Mahalia Jackson booming the Lord's Prayer. The movie-going public, who had only heard my records or read about my problems, got a good look at me, and for the first time, they had an image to go with the sound. I've thought about it a lot, and I've concluded that the fact I looked so together after the horrendous things they'd read about me going through caught their imaginations. If there is a legend, as writers keep insisting, I think it began with Jazz on a Summer's Day. Okay, so anyway, she just says the film and these Voice of America broadcasts created demand for her services abroad. So she did a lot of touring and got big in Japan, as many people.
That is amazing, Anne. Thank you for doing that. Like, oh my God, that made me so happy. As you could see, I had a perma grin. That was such a treat. Well, Tea for Two is incredible in this. It is at such a clip.
Oh my God. She starts doing some scat stuff in there, if that's what it is.
Well, what's really funny is I can do the call and response thing by memory that she does at the end. She goes, E.
Oh, yes.
E. And that is from me listening to that film 2,000 times.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I just love it. It's so, I mean, the film sounds great beyond it looking great, but what an amazing thing that this film just let people see for the first time just how magnificent she was.
Yes. And there was another part in the book that there were all these young kids, beatniky kids in the early 60s or late 50s, early 60s, and who would come to see her. I think it was at the Village Vanguard, I'm not sure. But one of them was a young beatniky Barbra Streisand before she even recorded anything. She's definitely got a beatnik look going. And she said something to Anita O'Day. I think she met her later. She said, "How did I do, teacher?" or something.
Of course.
But I think for that the criticisms of the film are legitimate, but I don't think they take away from what the film is. So if you just sort of accept that, well, this is what it is. Bert Stern came out of advertising and fashion photography. He's presenting what he could with what he was given, and who knows what kind of releases you got. Maybe Anita O'Day wouldn't have even signed the release if her drummer hadn't done it for her, and
right,
she was too high to care, really. But not high, not too high to deliver the goods.
Yeah. The film's very poetic and it's just got its own pacing. And yeah, it's if you're going in just to watch a typical concert film, you may be disappointed, but I think there's a real beauty to it that was just time and place. And also, again, Bert just being the person who was doing it. Again, if it had been someone else doing it, been a completely different experience.
Yes, and every filmmaker, it's their point of view, but I think that what I come away with it is there's a sense of joy, and there's a lot of joy from everybody who is performing, and it reminds you like why people want to make music, why you want to listen to music. This is a moment in time where things are okay. Things are okay. We're having a good time. And gosh, wouldn't that be nice if that could be most of the time? I think why this movie also touches me so deeply, and I'm gonna start getting emotional, is because I'm the only one left of my family. And to get to go back to 1958, although I was just two, so I don't know how much I really remember of it, but I remember my mother with the red lipstick, or a bright red sweater, and my dad with the short hair, of them dancing at the supper club. I can see all of that in this film, and it brings them back to life. And that's why it touches me so beautifully. And then to actually have to be in the presence of Mahalia Jackson, who my grandmother loved so much, that brings her back to life. And even seeing the little kids playing when my brother, who was born in 1958, it brings him back to life. So, and then most of these musicians are all gone. So they still exist. They're still alive in this film, and it's very special. It's very special. So thank you for letting me share my impressions of it.
What you just talked about, obviously, I zeroed in on it too. I mean, just the people in it and the joy and the era. And I'm really touched that you were so open about everything. But the the interesting thing is, at the end of every episode, I ask a question and I tailor it. And sometimes it's very silly, and sometimes it's more poignant. But this seems really apt to what you just were talking about. So I asked, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, what you think of the movie. But I said, on a scale from 1 to 10, how many clear moonlit nights dancing in a red cardigan on a beach to the distant sounds of this movie do you give this film? And after what you just told me, I'm just like really, because I can feel it too. Music and film, it's time travel for me. I get,
Yes,
it makes me cry. I mean, music makes me cry at the drop of a hat, and
yes,
um,
yes.
and just the joy of it. And watching this film recently, I got really emotional watching it because it just, again, I have connections to it.
I did too. I did too. Well, I think what I would like to say is one thing that made it resonate for me was that I really wish I would not look at so much at the news and at Twitter, whatever it's called now, that Dr. Fauci calls that cesspool of interaction, but somehow the grip of 21st technology and all the insanity that's going on out there. This was
Yeah.
such a relief to go into this world where people are coming together to share their this love for music and just being quietly and sometimes passionately, but simply alive and not fighting with each other, not finding fault with each other. Granted, 1958, there's a if the camera had gone over to the news, and you'd see the horrible things going on to the black, what the white racists were inflicting on the Black community in the Deep South, in the North, or wherever it was. Bad things were going on, absolutely, then. But there was this island of peace, and maybe it's somewhat manufactured because it's a film, but it's a little jewel. It's a little island that we can go visit, and everybody's enjoying their shared humanity as it's expressed in music, and not engaging in all this hate that was certainly there, certainly going on then. And it is full blown right now. And I fear for this country of where we're going into this fascist black hole. And it's important to hold on to these beautiful moments that human beings can share with each other, and make that the predominant vibration. And that's what this film can remind us to do.
And I love you so much. I've known you for decades. I think we're in the same spot. I mean, I think we'd give this moment, we do this into infinity to dance like this.
Yes.
And, I think, your history, in New York, and the AIDS epidemic, and making art during that and everything. It's just, I understand that how much art means and music means.
John, my husband, just said there was something he read that Nick Cave said recently. He said muses are for losers. And I said, what does he mean by that? He's had lots of muses. And he said, no, it was in a response to being told that young people don't want to create because of the state of the world. And I said, heck, that's the reason to create.
Totally.
That's the why we do create. I mean,
yeah.
This is be more creative. Be more creative. Folks, it's time for the protest songs. Get out there, brush up your Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger, and just get out there, and you got to fight.
Yeah.
You got to fight, because, us old folks, we're going to do what we can, but you're the ones with the stamina. So, it's not all about a pretty muse. It's also about, you got to fight fascism. This machine fights fascism, as Woody Guthrie had written on his guitar. So get out there.
Yes.
Do it.
Yeah.
You can't stop. I mean, take a little break. But when you got to do it, you got to do it. And all the people who were on stage in that film, they were going to be doing that no matter what, Anyway, I'm getting on a soapbox.
No.
Get off of it.
And thank you so much. This means the world to me.
Thank you.
It was great to see you, and so excited because you're still making cool shit, like I love that, you have a new song and a new video, and it's totally of your weirdness in your life. And
Charlie McCoy plays harmonica on it. I never in a million years. Oh my God. So miracles can still happen when you're old.
Right behind you.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it.
You got it.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday. We are a completely independently produced affair, so the best way to support us is to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app, and to subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get exclusive weekly bonus episodes every Sunday, as well as one-of-a-kind handmade Revolutions Per Movie goods that I send out to you. You can follow the show on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and find more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!